Trump called her low IQ. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Not in the hearing, not on camera. Not even when the headline exploded before noon. He wasn't in the room. He didn't need to be. From the safety of his phone, Trump fired off a missile. On Truth Social, low IQ Democrat reprobate Jasmine Crockett, who barely scraped through law school. Another disaster for America. How'd she even pass the bar? The post landed like a slap. Phones lit up. Offices buzzed. Twitter, still clinging to chaos, turned it into a meme mill of mockery and outrage. Inside the House Oversight Committee room, Crockett was mid-sentence when her aide slipped her a printout. She glanced at it, blinked once, kept going. But the camera caught it, the stiffness in her spine, the cool drop in her tone. A routine hearing had just become a flashpoint. The insult wasn't new, it wasn't clever, but it was calculated. He picked a target few outside Texas knew. Freshman Congresswoman, civil rights attorney, public defender, woman who looked nothing like the old guard, and that was the point. He mocked her the way he always did, just enough racism to thrill his base, just enough bite to bait the media. By nightfall, every network ran the story. Trump slams Representative Crockett as low IQ and truth, social tirade. Another dog whistle, another. Fire lit. Jasmine didn't blink. Outside her office, reporters swarmed. Congresswoman, care to respond? Flashbulbs fired. She gave a tight smile. Y'all want fireworks? I'm not in the fireworks business. I'm here to work. And just like that, she walked away. No counterattack. No clapback. Just silence. Sharp, deliberate, unnerving. That silence made people listen even harder. But when the cameras went off and staff went home, it hit different. Alone in her office, barefoot and scrolling, Jasmine watched her name trend for the wrong reasons. Looks like she got her degree. From a cereal box, day token. How many times did she fail the bar? She sighed, closed the tab. The glow of the Capitol dome flickered through the blinds. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, but the weight settled, heavy, familiar. The same pressure she felt back when she was a public defender, right before a cross-examination. That. A moment when everyone's watching to see if you fold. She hadn't folded then. She wouldn't now. A knock. Ryan Hall, her chief of staff, leaned in. You good? She gave a half smile. Depends how many more interview requests we get. At least a dozen. MSNBC wants you tomorrow. CNN too. I'm not doing a press tour over his tantrum, she said. He wants a reaction. He can bark. I'm not dancing. Ryan hesitated. Maybe it's time people saw who you really are. She looked up. They saw... No, they didn't. Not like we do, he continued. Lane mentioned something. Earlier, that professor who wrote your bar recommendation. Didn't he used to be a Reagan guy? She blinked. Professor Lowell. Constitutional law. Brilliant. Old school conservative. Taught me more about the First Amendment than anyone. He's still around? He's probably writing a book in Vermont or lecturing at Georgetown. Ryan smiled slightly. Might be a good time for him to speak, she laughed. What? You want me? To call my law professor? To defend me from Trump? I want the truth out there. And he's one of the few people Trump's base might actually respect. She didn't answer. Just stared out the window. Back in her mind, second row, classroom. Lowell's voice firm, surgical, relentless. And she held her own. Case after case. Maybe Ryan had a point, but Jasmine wasn't the only one thinking about that classroom. Across town, in a quiet Maryland kitchen, Professor Walter Lowell stirred a bowl of oatmeal he no longer wanted. His wife Alina stood by. The stove, arms crossed. You saw the post? She asked. I did, he said. And you saw who he picked this time. He nodded. That's the girl, isn't it? Woman, he corrected gently. And yes, that's her. Lowell knew Jasmine Crockett was different. She didn't charm. She challenged. Didn't coast. Didn't flinch. She had challenged him, even when it made the room uncomfortable. He scrolled through old emails until he found it. Her request for a recommendation. Dated 8 years ago. Attached. His letter. He read it again. Jasmine Crockett is not just an exceptional legal thinker. She is a force of discipline, curiosity, and moral clarity. She doesn't just want to be right, she wants to understand why others are wrong. Exhaled. I'm going to say something, he told his wife. You sure? She asked. You don't usually wade into this kind of mess. This one matters. The next morning, Jasmine was already knee-deep in legislative calls when Lane burst in holding a laptop. You need to see this, she said. It was a video. Simple, no graphics, no music. Just Lowell, in a book-lined room, glasses perched. Low eyes steady on the lens. I don't usually comment on political noise, he began. But I taught Jasmine Crockett, and I feel obligated to speak now. He described her in class, her courtroom logic. The time she dismantled a grad student twice her age in a mock trial. Then, if you're questioning her intelligence, you're either lying or you weren't paying attention. The video ended. Jasmine stared at the screen. Lane broke the silence. It's been up 20 minutes. Already has 80,000 views. Someone made a reel, put Trump's post at the top. Ryan entered, phone in hand. Morning Joe. Wants you tomorrow. The View next week. And 2 Republicans, one from Arizona, one from Pennsylvania, just retweeted it. Jasmine leaned back, arms folded. It wasn't just what Lowell said. It was that he said it. He didn't do politics, didn't chase clicks. He spoke because it mattered, and soon the moment would be bigger than both of them. By noon, the video passed 400,000 views. Clips spread across platforms, edits, subtitles, juxtapositions of Trump's insult with Lowell's calm rebuttal. And more were watching. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's the signal that something louder is coming. The contrast was magnetic. Cable networks couldn't get enough. MSNBC branded it the classroom clapback. CNN aired it on loop before every commercial break. Even conservative outlets couldn't look away, though they framed it as another example of liberal media theatrics. But that was the thing. Lowell wasn't liberal, and people noticed. He wasn't a pundit, wasn't flogging a book or auditioning for a segment. He was a constitutional law professor in his 60s, taught at the University of Houston, guest lectured at Georgetown in Utah, a registered Republican and former Reagan staffer known for keeping his head down and his comments careful. And now here he was, calling out a former president for targeting his former student. That disarmed people, especially the ones who didn't want to admit the attack hadn't been about policy or party. Maybe it had been about something else entirely. In Austin, Texas, Jasmine's parents sat on their couch watching the clip. Her father, Horace, a retired electrician and quiet man who avoided politics, watched the whole thing without a word. Then, remote in hand, he shut off the TV. She's handling this better than I would have, he said. Her mother, Letitia, nodded. She's been handling things better than both of us since she was 10. Across the country, the narrative was shifting. Analysts who once overlooked Jasmine Crockett were scrambling to catch up. Podcasts, profiles, think pieces. She grew up in St. Louis, graduated from Rhodes College. Law degree from University of Houston, one host recited. Turned down corporate firms to become a public defender. Oh, that tells you something. It was all public record, but now people were paying attention. Not just because she'd been insulted, but because they wanted to know who she really was. And maybe what they had missed back on Capitol Hill. Jasmine met with her team behind closed doors. Ryan leaned against the wall. Lane was cross-legged in a chair. Jasmine stood by the window, arms folded, watching the city blur below. They're spinning this fast, Lane said. Some outlets are painting you as a victim. Others say you're milking it. I don't want pity, Jasmine said. And I'm not milking anything, I know, Lane replied. But they don't. Ryan checked his phone. Lowell just turned down NPR and Fox. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Why? He said he already said what needed saying. That's it. A small smile crossed her lips. Sounds like him. She paused, then added, We don't pivot. Don't exploit this. But I'm not pretending it didn't happen either. If someone asks, I'll answer on my terms. "You want to write a statement?" Ryan asked. "No," she said. "I want them to see my record, not my reaction." That afternoon, the messages started flooding in. Not just from supporters, from law professors, from public defenders, from former Republican clerks. One student at Texas Southern sent an email recounting the time Jasmine stayed after a legal aid summit to answer every single student's question, one-on-one. People remembered things. They shared them. One professor called her a rare kind of honest, another tough in all the ways the job demands, and kind in all the ways the law forgets. For every troll in her mentions, there were now 3 strangers calling her brilliant, grounded, and unshakably composed. Of course, not everyone was convinced. One conservative pundit tweeted, "Cool head, great, but spare me the law school sob story. Congress is full of degrees. Doesn't mean you're fit to lead." Still, something had shifted. Even Trump's usual defenders were quiet, because defending the insult now meant discrediting Lowell. And not everyone was willing to go that far. But no one expected what came next. The story had already gone viral. Now it was about to leap off the screen and land directly on the House floor. Thursday morning came with steady rain and a strange stillness. Jasmine walked the Capitol tunnel system with Ryan beside her. Coffee in one hand, briefing folder in the other. She wasn't in the mood for headlines. The professor's video was still circulating. Everyone wanted a quote, a reaction, a clip. But Jasmine wasn't giving them one. Ryan handed her the day's schedule. Tech regulation hearing at 10, closed-door ethics at 1, press availability at 3. "I'm skipping the press," she said flatly. "You can't." "I can," she repeated slower. "I'm not feeding another round of sound bites." Today, Ryan didn't push. He knew the look. She wasn't moving unless it mattered. Mid-morning, routine procedural vote. Jasmine was on the House floor when her phone buzzed once, twice again. 5 texts. 2 missed calls? She scanned them quickly. One from Lane stood out. "Turn on C-SPAN 3 now." Across the aisle, Representative Dax Monroe, a Republican from Missouri with a law degree, was speaking at a low-key legal ethics symposium. And then, unexpectedly, the moderator introduced a distinguished guest with a critical perspective. Professor Walter Lowell stepped to the mic. No announcement. Not on the program, suit crisp, glasses low, calm, but unmistakably sharp. The room shifted. A few aides sat up straighter. "I've taught constitutional law for over 30 years, he began. "White students who now sit on federal benches, lead state legislatures, argue before the Supreme Court." Then he paused. "One of the most formidable students I ever taught was a young woman named Jasmine Crockett." Silence. She wasn't loud. She didn't try to sound smart. She was smart because she showed up prepared every single week. He lifted an old syllabus. Spring 2008. Week 11. Due process and prosecutorial discretion. Most of the class skimmed. Jasmine didn't. She was the only one who caught a dissent's-embedded critique of racial bias and challenged me on it. Not emotionally, intellectually. He let the moment breathe. She saw what others missed. That's what good lawyers do. Back in the chamber, Jasmine watched live on her phone, earbuds in, heart knocking. Ryan, seated behind her, mouthed, "What's happening?" She showed him the screen. Lowell's voice continued, "You can attack someone's politics, their policies. That's democracy. But if you're going to question someone's intelligence, their merit, their right to serve, then be prepared to answer for it. I've taught Ivy Leaguers. I've taught state school strivers. Jasmine Crockett asked better questions than half the people on television today." A few quiet claps rose from the panel audience, not performative, just genuine. Then he finished with a line that would echo for days. "Some people talk to be heard. Jasmine Crockett listens to understand. There's a difference. And some of us still know it when we see it." The clip hit the internet before the panel even. Adjourned Reddit, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, spliced, shared, quoted, captioned by afternoon. People who'd never heard of Walter Lowell were reposting him like he was a statesman. But as quickly as he emerged, a single line from his office, Professor Lowell said all he intended to say. He will not comment further.
back!
In her office, Jasmine sat at her desk, earbuds still in, laptop still open. Lane leaned on the doorframe. "Well," she said, "he didn't just support you. He redefined you." Jasmine shook her head. "He didn't do it for me." "Maybe not," Lane replied, "but he did it because of you. It's not nothing." A knock. An intern entered. With a transcript of Lowell's remarks, Jasmine took it, ran a finger along the edge and said softly, "I hope they were listening." But now, after all the noise, all the headlines, all the unexpected allies, it was her turn to speak. And how she chose to do it would either close the chapter or change the whole story. Normally, politics was a game of optics, of controlling the soundbite, the frame, the message. But this time, Jasmine hadn't said much at all. Somehow, that silence only amplified her presence. Others had spoken for her, not just allies, not just the expected names. Unexpected voices began to step forward. By noon, a law professor posted a thread recalling Jasmine's sharp legal analysis during a guest lecture 2 years ago. Then came a blog from a former assistant U.S. attorney in Phoenix. He'd once shared a panel with her, left impressed, surprised, and in his words, frankly, corrected. It was all happening quietly, steadily, even conservative legal. Minds were beginning to take notice. One name stood out. Judge Calvin Berenger, appointed by George W. Bush. Known for his frigid courtroom, demeanor, and near-total silence outside his rulings. Until now, in a rare letter to the American lawyer, Berenger wrote, "I've observed Representative Crockett's conduct in hearings and reviewed her questioning style. In an era where shouting is rewarded, she chooses sharp, clean logic. I may not agree with her conclusions, but I'd trust her to teach a courtroom how to argue fairly. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't emotional. But that's why it hit so hard. Because it came from a man who had nothing to gain and a lot of tradition to protect." In Jasmine's office, Lane paced with a phone pressed to her ear. Wait. "Say that again," she said. A pause. "Then you're serious, him?" She hung up and turned to Jasmine, who was sipping tea, half listening. "Congressman Pritchard wants to meet." Jasmine frowned. "Garrett Pritchard." Lane nodded. "Yep, the same Pritchard, who once said women of color were too emotional to lead, requesting a private meeting." The professor's speech must have hit something. Jasmine leaned back. "Is this real, or is he just trying to pre-spin the backlash?" Lane shrugged. "No idea. But it's worth hearing what he says." They met in a side room just off the rotunda. No cameras, no pretense. Pritchard arrived alone. No aides, no staff armor. Just a navy sweater, khakis, and a sheepish gait. He shook Jasmine's hand, eyes down. "I appreciate you making the time." "I'm surprised you asked," she said, not unkindly. He exhaled. "I deserve that." Pause. Longer than it needed. "To be?" "I watched the professor's speech," he said. "Twice. It made me go back and watch you. Not the clips. Not the montages." "Full hearings?" and Jasmine asked. "I realized I hadn't been listening," he admitted. "I had this version of you in my head, and it didn't match what I saw. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. I've underestimated people before," Jasmine said quietly. "But I try not to make a habit of it," he nodded. "I'm not asking for a headline. I'm just saying I was wrong." She studied him. No cameras waiting. No press release loaded. Just a man trying awkwardly, maybe honestly, to take a step backward. "Thank you," she said. "That's not easy." He paused in the doorway before leaving. "For what it's worth," he said, "I don't think Trump expected this either." Meanwhile, public opinion was shifting, fast. An NPR poll over the weekend showed a 23-point jump in Jasmine's name recognition among independents. But the real surprise? The favorability wasn't just coming from Democrats, suburban, moderates, veterans, young lawyers, even a handful of conservative women. Something was resonating. It wasn't just her credentials. It was the way she hadn't lashed out. The way she kept working while others filled the air. People respected that. Even people who didn't vote like her. On Sunday, Jasmine took a call from Mina Dello, a former classmate. Now, a legal analyst in Minnesota. You don't know what this week has meant, Mina said. I barely know what day it is, Jasmine replied, half laughing. I'm serious. Law students at St. Cloud State played Lowell's speech in class. My niece said she wants to be like you. Jasmine smiled, quiet, tired, but real. Tell her to aim higher. No, Mina said. Tell her to aim just as high. Be just as ready. Men appreciated the support, but she also knew she couldn't stay silent forever. It was time to speak, not for drama, not for retaliation, but for clarity, and the country was listening. By Monday morning, energy in D.C. had shifted. This wasn't just attention anymore. It was expectation. Journalists hovered outside committee rooms. News vans clogged Capitol streets. Everyone waited for Jasmine Crockett to say something. They wanted a soundbite, a line, a headline. She gave them none of it. Her team suggested 60 minutes. Meet the press, she declined. If she was going to speak, it would be from the Hill where she worked, in her voice. No script, no teleprompter. At 2 p.m., she stepped through the heavy doors outside her office and approached a modest podium. No flash. No designer flair. Just a navy blazer and the kind of presence that didn't ask for permission. She scanned the crowd, cleared her throat, then began, I wasn't planning on addressing this. It was enough to hush the room. But when someone questions not just your qualifications, but your capacity to think you're right to be here, that's not just about me. That hits every young woman who's had to walk into a room and prove she belonged before she even opened her mouth. She didn't yell. She didn't pause for effect. She just told the truth. I went to the University of Houston Law Center. I chose public defense over big law. I represented people who had nothing, not even someone to explain the charges. Against them, I didn't do it for applause. I did it because justice isn't supposed to be for the privileged. No one shuffled. No one blinked. Some people thought I should have fired back louder, meaner. But that's not my job. My job is to serve, to question, to legislate. And I'll keep doing that. Same focus, same purpose. She leaned slightly forward. When my professor spoke up, I didn't ask him to. He chose to, because truth doesn't need a team. It just needs someone to say it. Then one final line, the one that would define the week. You don't have to like me. You don't have to vote for me. But don't confuse humility with weakness. Don't confuse grace with silence. Don't confuse your opinion with my resume. From the back, wow, it was done in under 5 minutes. It's no grandstanding. No blame. Just a plain-spoken, bulletproof statement. Reporters called after her, Congresswoman.
Any response to the president's latest post?
Do you feel vindicated after Professor Lowell's remarks? She walked on, paused only once. I feel like the work speaks louder than the noise. The clip ran for 24 hours straight, by week's end. The phrase, don't confuse your opinion with my resume, was on t-shirts. Some called it the most composed congressional clapback in years, but more than that, it worked. Not because it shut down critics, but because it recentered the conversation. She hadn't fought back. She'd refused to be dragged down. People saw that emails poured in, from teachers, nurses, law students, former public defenders. One note read, I used to think people like you only existed in speeches. Thank you for showing up without yelling. That evening, Jasmine sat alone in her apartment. No aides, no cameras. Just the soft hum of the AC and the click of ice in her glass. She kicked off her heels and opened her laptop not to read news, but to review internship applications from local students back in Texas. The first one had a short essay. It ended like this. Congresswoman Crockett, I used to think I wasn't smart enough to go into law. But watching you stand in that storm made me think maybe I just needed to try harder. Jasmine stared at the line for a long time. Then she smiled. Not big, not for show. Just a quiet, earned smile. But even with the storm behind her, the political arena wasn't done yet. The next hearing was coming. And this time, every camera was already locked on her seat. It started like every other hearing, words like transparency, accountability, bipartisan goals tossed around like confetti. But everyone in the room knew that was just the opening act. The temperature shifted when Representative Dennis Michael of Indiana began speaking. Michaels was infamous for his sideways shots, never quite a direct insult, always veiled in mock courtesy. "Thank you, Madam Representative," he said as Jasmine finished her questioning. Very passionate line of thought. He leaned toward the mic, eyes glinting. "I do appreciate the emotional clarity you bring to these discussions, though I must say, legal nuance often requires more than just conviction." A few smirks flickered. That quiet kind of laughter reserved for petty victories, an insult wrapped in a handshake. Jasmine didn't blink. She calmly adjusted her chair, leaned forward, and delivered her response, not louder, just sharper. "I find it interesting, Congressman, that you're critiquing nuance, while ignoring the data presented in the last panel. Issue it. Hand isn't emotional. It's constitutional. And if you'd like, I can walk you through the case law you clearly skipped." Michaels blinked. Twice. Then leaned back, silent. The smirks disappeared. The room shifted again, this time toward her. Within the hour, the exchange exploded online. Clips were everywhere. Crockett schools Michaels with calm precision. Don't mistake her silence for ignorance. The student becomes the teacher. It wasn't just that Jasmine had held her ground. It was that she did it where it counted, inside the chamber, with facts. And just as the buzz began to crest, something else happened again, unexpectedly. At Georgetown, a panel on legal integrity was underway. A quiet event, lawyers, judges, policy wonks. The kind of room where words mattered more than cameras. But halfway through a discussion on judicial independence, someone mentioned Jasmine Crockett. It was meant to be a passing reference. It turned into a conversation. And in the front row, Professor Walter Lowell stood up. No announcement, no invitation, just presence. The moderator, stunned, offered him the mic. He hesitated, checked his watch, and stepped forward. "I wasn't planning to speak again," he said. "I've heard a lot in the last 10 minutes. About decorum, civility, and how lawmakers should conduct themselves. I agree. A pause. A pivot.
Out.
But if we're going to demand professionalism, we should recognize it when it shows up." He scanned the room, didn't need his notes, though he glanced anyway. Last week, Representative Crockett was called unintelligent by a president. This week, she was condescended to by a fellow member of Congress. In both instances, she responded not with insult, but with evidence. Not with posturing, but precision. Heads nodded, some reluctantly, some with reverence. Lowell's voice didn't rise. Can't dismiss someone for being too loud. Act. And then ignore. Them, when they speak softly, that's not about tone. It's about bias. That line would echo across op-ed pages for the rest of the week. Back in her office, Jasmine walked in to find Ryan waiting. He held up his phone. "You made front page again?" She sighed. "What now?" He grinned. "They're calling you the calm counterpunch." She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a boxing nickname. Better than low IQ." She laughed, this time genuinely. "Let them talk. I'm not here for the headlines. I'm here for the footnotes." Ryan tilted his head. "What does that mean?" "It means history remembers. The loudest voices. But it respects the ones that did the work." And Jasmine? She was ready to turn that quiet respect into something tangible, something lasting. By Friday, the shift was no longer just political, it was cultural. You could feel it in barbershops. In Dayton, brunch tables in San Bernardino, law school lounges in Des Moines and Tallahassee. People who hadn't known Jasmine Crockett's name a week ago were now quoting her. Not everyone agreed with her politics, but they agreed on one thing. She wasn't the caricature that Post tried to paint. That mattered. Because when someone's targeted, people don't always speak up unless they feel part of the story.
Oh.
But this wasn't just party lines anymore. It was about being diminished for daring to exist where you weren't expected. And people were tired of seeing that. In a Kansas City cafe, an older man in a veteran's cap watched Jasmine's exchange with Michaels on his phone. He chuckled. Didn't raise her voice once, he muttered. still tore the guy's argument apart. His daughter leaned in. Who is she? He turned the screen. Some congresswoman from Texas. Trump tried to clown her last week. She didn't take the bait. Smart move. He nodded. Maybe we need more people like that. News coverage began to shift. One local anchor in Nebraska said it best. In an era where political theater gets more airtime than policy, Crockett's quiet focus is doing something rare. It's making people listen. Networks replayed her full press conference uncut. People weren't sharing her clapbacks, they were sharing her composure. Online comments reflected it, didn't play victim. Just showed up prepared. Fact first, ego second. Respect. But it was steady and growing. That weekend, Jasmine's team held a virtual town hall. Normally they'd see about 200 participants. This time, over 1,700. Questions came in infrastructure, debt ceiling, but also thank yous. One older woman spoke at the end, voice cracking. When you stood there and didn't let that man drag you down, it felt like you were carrying the rest of us with you. Jasmine swallowed hard. Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know. Meanwhile, her office was flooded with calls, not for media, but for policy. A teacher in Spokane wanted her to zoom into a civics class. Nonprofit in Tulsa asked if she'd help with legal education programs. Even a moderate Republican mayor from Indiana called. We don't have to agree on everything, he said. But you've shown you don't walk in here just trying to fight. I can work with that. Jasmine didn't hesitate. In hand, scribbling notes. Let's do something real, she said. Not just something that sounds good. In the background, Martina, her legislative aide, was tracking analytics. She pulled Ryan aside. You're going to want to see this. He scanned the chart. His eyes widened. This isn't just engagement. This is movement. Approval among independents is up 12 points in 4 days. He looked over at Jasmine, still reviewing a housing subcommittee request like it. Was any other Monday? She has no idea how big this is, does she? Martina smiled. I think she does. She just doesn't care about that part. That was the difference. She wasn't surfing the wave. She was working beneath it. While others chased optics, Jasmine Crockett was drafting legislation, specifically a new education funding bill. Monday morning arrived the way it always does. In D.C., more pressure than time, more noise than clarity. But inside Jasmine's office, there was only one focus. The bill. Written quietly over the weekend, ready to be introduced. No splashy title, no press release, just substance. She'd been tracking the issue for months. Underfunded legal literacy programs in low-income high schools. She believed students should know their rights before they needed a lawyer. The timing wasn't a coincidence. She knew the world was watching. But instead of launching a brand, she filed a bill. Because Jasmine Crockett wasn't chasing a moment. She was building something, so others could find their way through the system too. And in a city obsessed with noise, that was the loudest thing she could have done.